especially with feeder fishing, regardless of the terrain that you're faced with, it's so important to have that reference point, to be accurate with where you're fishing, for a number of reasons. A, I want to build up my peg, I want to be accurate where my bait's going, but especially in match conditions, I might have a multitude of setups. So for example, today we're at Underbank Reservoir, just on the outskirts of Sheffield, fishing for hopefully a lovely net of skimmers, using a multitude of approaches from a conventional feeder to a method feeder. And for that reason, regardless of what rod I actually pick up, I want to know that I'm fishing in the same spot. So I'm going to start off with a conventional feeder, get my peg going, hopefully catch a few small skimmers, some roach, and if the bream move in, then it allows me to be more positive, to pick up that method feeder rod, bigger bait, a different feeding approach regarding using pellets through the feeder. So when I pick up a method feeder rod up, I want to know I'm casting in exactly the same position, the same part of my peg where I'm building that peg up. Now what I've done is I've spent a bit of time on the bomb, plumbing around, finding a nice depth, which is really important, the right distance, because big open waters like this, you've got to make sure you don't fish too far out so you can fish efficiently, but also in your head you know that it's a lovely clear bottom, and I'm happy with where I'm fishing. So I've reattached a feeder back onto my setup, taken the bomb off, and what I need to do now is I need to mark the distance. Now on this rod I'm using braid. The sticks that I'm using are 2 meters apart. You can have them 3 meters apart, but I prefer them 2. I just think it's an easier reference point to count as well. So all you have to do now is secure that feeder, stand back, and take your time. Make sure everything's nice and tight as well. There's no rush. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, 32, 34, just over 35 meters, so I'm really happy with that. Now, a good thing to remember, I'm a big believer in marking my line, marking that distance on my clip. So today, for example, I could start off at this distance at 35 meters, and I might want to venture that little bit further out, whether it's a meter, 2 meters, 3 meters. So rather than getting back off my box and re-clipping, I mark my line, and this is why I'm a big believer in using a pale line. So today, for example, on this rod, I'm using 010 creaky braid. I absolutely love this braid. I'm going to do a separate video about how good this braid is and why I love it, the properties of the braid and why I love it. But one of the main reasons is it's a pale colour, and that allows me to mark the distance. So I'm going to get a marker pen out of my pocket, black marker pen, and just mark next to the clip the distance, like so. So if I do want to take the clip off and venture further out, I've got that reference point to come back to. Now the most important thing is when you actually go to reel the braid back onto the spool, again, take your time, make sure that you're bedding the braid back into the spool, because what a lot of anglers make a mistake of is they want to rush that process. And if you rush that process by lifting the rod up and letting the braid naturally loosely peel off those sticks, the braid isn't bedding into the spool, and then when you go to cast out, it often causes wind knots and crack offs. I don't want that to happen. So take your time, make sure as you reel down, everything's nice and tight and it's bedding back into the spool. And I'm actually, as I'm doing it, I'm reeling right down, almost as if I'm winding back a fish, like so. There we go. And then what we're off to do now is unravel the feeder, and we're all ready for a great day's fishing. Let's get going.